The anticipation in the air was electric, as fans eagerly awaited what promised to be one of the most exciting episodes of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The studio buzzed with excitement, and the audience couldn't stop talking about the guest of honor, none other than Keanu Reeves. Known for his iconic roles in blockbuster movies like The Matrix and John Wick, Keanu had become more than just a Hollywood star. He was a symbol of humility, kindness, and quiet strength. His presence always brought a sense of calm and authenticity that resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. As the audience settled into their seats, the energy was palpable. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary episode. Keanu was there to promote his latest movie, a high-octane action flick that critics were already hailing as one of the best films of the year. But beyond the glitz and glamour of his career, Keanu had also been making headlines for something entirely different. In recent interviews, he had spoken candidly about some hot-button topics, including celebrity culture, social responsibility, and how public figures should use their platforms. His words struck a chord with many, but they also sparked debates across social media and entertainment news outlets. Backstage, however, things weren't as relaxed as they seemed on the surface. While the audience chatted excitedly and crew members made final preparations, whispers circulated among the staff about what might unfold during the interview. Jimmy Kimmel, known for his sharp wit and playful banter, had hinted in pre-show meetings that he planned to ask Keanu some tough questions. Sources close to the production later revealed that Jimmy wanted to challenge Keanu on certain comments he'd made in previous interviews. Comments that some interpreted as criticism of celebrities who engage in what Keanu called performative activism. For those unfamiliar with the term, performative activism refers to actions taken by individuals or groups that appear to support a cause but lack genuine commitment or follow-through. It's a topic that often sparks heated discussions, especially when it involves public figures whose every move is scrutinized under the microscope of fame. Keanu had addressed this issue thoughtfully in earlier appearances, emphasizing the importance of sincerity and meaningful action over empty gestures. However, not everyone agreed with his perspective, and Jimmy saw an opportunity to dig deeper into the subject. Meanwhile, Keanu prepared for the show with his usual calm demeanor. Dressed casually yet impeccably in a black leather jacket and jeans, he reviewed notes with his publicist before heading out. Despite his outward composure, insiders noted that he seemed unusually reflective. Perhaps he sensed that tonight's conversation wouldn't stick strictly to promoting his film. Or maybe he simply understood the weight of discussing such sensitive topics on national television. Whatever the case, Keanu carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had endeared him to millions worldwide. As the clock ticked closer to showtime, the atmosphere grew tense behind the scenes. Producers reminded Jimmy to keep the tone light while still pushing boundaries, a delicate balance that required skill and finesse. For his part, Jimmy appeared unfazed, cracking jokes with the band and rehearsing punchlines. Yet beneath his easygoing exterior, there was a hint of determination in his eyes. He knew this interview could either be a memorable moment or a potential disaster, depending on how it played out. Out front, the audience erupted into cheers as the house lights dimmed and the opening theme music blared through the speakers. Jimmy took his place at the desk, flashing his trademark grin as he greeted viewers at home and those lucky enough to attend the taping live. After delivering a lively monologue filled with clever quips and lighthearted jabs at current events, he finally turned his attention to the main event. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice dripping with enthusiasm, "please welcome the one and only Keanu Reeves." The crowd went wild, erupting into applause so loud it nearly drowned out the introduction. Keanu emerged from backstage, waving graciously as he made his way to the couch. Clad in his signature understated style, he exuded an aura of approachability and warmth. As he shook hands with Jimmy and settled into his seat, the two exchanged pleasantries, setting the stage for what initially appeared to be a friendly and routine chat. Little did anyone know, however, that beneath the surface of polite smiles and cordial greetings, a storm was brewing, one that would soon captivate audiences far beyond the confines of the studio. What started as a typical late-night talk show Appearance was about to take an unexpected turn, leaving both participants and viewers alike holding their breath. The tension simmering backstage was about to boil over, transforming what should have been a celebratory evening into a moment of raw honesty and unfiltered emotion. For better or worse, this episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live would go down in history, not just as another entry in the long list of celebrity interviews, but as a defining moment that tested the limits of civility and authenticity in the world of entertainment. The interview began innocently enough, with Jimmy Kimmel leaning back in his chair, exuding his trademark charm. He greeted Keanu warmly, cracking a light-hearted joke about how the actor's presence always seemed to elevate any room he entered. The audience chuckled and clapped, clearly thrilled to see their favorite star up close. Keanu smiled politely, nodding along as Jimmy launched into a series of questions designed to ease him into the conversation. They started by discussing the basics: his new movie, its jaw-dropping action sequences, and what fans could expect from the highly anticipated release. Keanu answered these initial questions with his usual grace, speaking thoughtfully about the challenges of filming some of the more intense stunts and expressing gratitude for the talented team behind the project. His humility shone through as he credited his co-stars and crew, rather than focusing solely on his own contributions. This was classic Keanu, the man who had earned millions, but never let fame go to his head. The audience hung on his every word, captivated not just by his answers but by the genuine sincerity in his voice. But as the conversation shifted away from the film, the tone began to change ever so slightly. Jimmy steered the discussion toward broader topics, asking Keanu about life as a celebrity and how he navigated the pressures of fame. At first, Keanu responded diplomatically, acknowledging that being in the public eye came with both privileges and responsibilities. He spoke candidly about using his platform to highlight causes he cared about, such as supporting underprivileged youth and advocating for environmental conservation. His words were measured and heartfelt, reflecting the kind of introspection that made him stand out in Hollywood. Jimmy nodded approvingly, seemingly content to let Keanu elaborate on these points. But then, almost imperceptibly, the host's demeanor shifted. His smile remained affixed, but there was a glint in his eye, a subtle sign that he was ready to push the boundaries of the conversation. "You've been pretty vocal lately about the idea of celebrities taking real action instead of just talking," Jimmy remarked casually, leaning forward slightly. "Some people might say you're calling out your peers. Is that fair?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and Keanu paused before responding. It wasn't an accusation exactly, but it carried a weight that suggested Jimmy was testing the waters. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering his response carefully. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm, but firm. "I think it's important for anyone with influence, celebrities or otherwise, to do more than just pay lip service to the issues they claim to care about," he said. "It's easy to post something online or make a statement, but real change requires commitment and effort." The audience murmured in agreement, clearly resonating with Keanu's perspective. But Jimmy wasn't done yet. Sensing an opening, he pressed further, adopting a playful yet pointed tone. "So, would you say you're holding yourself to the same standard? Because, let's be honest, you're still making big-budget action, movies funded by major studios. Isn't that kind of performative too?" The word performative landed like a pebble dropped into still water, sending ripples across the room. For a brief moment, Keanu looked taken aback, though his expression quickly settled into one of quiet resolve. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "Making films is my job, and I take pride in doing it well," he replied evenly. "But I also believe in using whatever opportunities come my way to shine a light on things that matter. If someone watches one of my movies and learns something new because of the stories we tell or the messages we include, then I feel like I've done my part." Jimmy raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, or at least pretending to be. "Fair enough," he said with a smirk. "But doesn't that risk coming off as contradictory? Like you're criticizing others while staying firmly rooted in the system yourself?" His tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it that suggested he was enjoying poking holes in Keanu's argument. At this point, The audience began to sense that the dynamic between the two men was shifting. What had started as a friendly exchange was now teetering on the brink of something more confrontational. Some members of the crowd exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Others leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by the growing tension. Even the band, which typically provided musical interludes during commercial breaks, seemed to play softer, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Keanu didn't flinch under Jimmy's scrutiny. Instead, he maintained eye contact, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend to have all the answers," he admitted. "But I try to be mindful of the impact I have, not just as an actor, but as a person. And if that means speaking up when I see hypocrisy or half measures, then yeah, I'll do that." His response drew scattered applause from the audience, though it was clear that not everyone was entirely comfortable with the direction the interview was taking. Jimmy, however, appeared emboldened by Keanu's willingness to engage. He leaned even farther forward, resting his elbows on the desk as he prepared to deliver his next line of questioning. "Okay, but here's the thing," he said, his tone shifting from playful to probing. "When you call out performative activism, aren't you basically accusing other celebrities of being insincere? Doesn't that create a double standard, given that you're sitting here promoting a multi-million-dollar movie?" This time, Keanu didn't respond immediately. He took a deep breath, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. The once relaxed posture he'd adopted at the start of the interview was gone, replaced by a rigid attentiveness that signaled he was no longer willing to indulge Jimmy's line of questioning without pushing back. For the first time since the show began, the warmth in his voice gave way to a sharper edge. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," he said firmly. "What I'm saying is that we all have a responsibility to act with integrity, and if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe that's a good thing." The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs, their collective attention glued to the unfolding drama. Jimmy, sensing that he had struck a nerve, pressed on, his grin widening as he leaned back in his chair. "Well, I guess we'll leave it up to the viewers to decide," he quipped, attempting to lighten the mood. But the damage was done. The camaraderie that had characterized the early minutes of the interview had dissolved, replaced by an unmistakable tension that neither man seemed eager to diffuse. As the segment wore on, it became increasingly clear that this wasn't going to end quietly. Keanu's patience was wearing thin, and Jimmy's relentless prodding showed no signs of stopping. The stage was set for a confrontation that neither the audience nor the producers could have anticipated, and one that would soon spiral far beyond the confines of a typical late-night talk show. As the tension in the room thickened, Keanu's expression shifted ever so slightly. The calm, composed demeanor he had maintained throughout the interview began to crack, revealing a glimpse of the frustration simmering beneath the surface. Jimmy, perhaps sensing that he was pushing boundaries, continued to probe with what seemed like playful banter, but his tone carried an undercurrent of provocation that was impossible to ignore. "Let's be real for a second," Jimmy said, leaning forward again, his voice adopting a mock-serious tone. "You're sitting here talking about authenticity and integrity, but at the end of the day, you're still part of the machine. Aren't you just another cog in the Hollywood system?" He punctuated the question with a smirk, clearly aiming to elicit either a laugh or a defensive response. But Keanu didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly and his jaw tightened as he processed the implication behind Jimmy's words. The audience, which had been alternately laughing and murmuring throughout the exchange, grew quieter. There was a palpable shift in the energy of the room. People weren't just watching anymore. They were holding their breath, waiting to see how Keanu would respond. Would he brush off Jimmy's comment with a joke? Or would he confront it head-on? Keanu took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady but noticeably firmer than before. "I think there's a difference between being part of a system and perpetuating its worst aspects," he said, his gaze locking onto Jimmy's. "And if pointing out hypocrisy makes people uncomfortable, then maybe they need to take a closer look at themselves." Jimmy blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the directness of Keanu's reply. For someone known for his quiet humility, this was uncharted territory. Keanu wasn't raising his voice, but the intensity in his tone left no room for misinterpretation. He was drawing a line, and Jimmy was dangerously close to crossing it. Undeterred, Jimmy pressed on, seemingly determined to keep the upper hand. Okay, but isn't calling out hypocrisy kind of hypocritical when you're promoting a movie funded by one of the biggest studios in the world? He asked, spreading his hands wide as if inviting Keanu to explain himself. Doesn't that feel a little, I don't know, ironic? The word ironic hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment Keanu simply stared at Jimmy. It wasn't anger that flashed across his face. It was something deeper, more profound. It was disappointment. And when he finally spoke, his words carried a weight that silenced the entire room. If you're going to reduce real-world issues to punchlines every night, Keanu said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, then maybe you should reconsider whether you're the right person to have these conversations. The audience gasped audibly, some members exchanging shocked glances while others sat frozen in disbelief. No one expected Keanu, quiet, unassuming Keanu, to deliver such a pointed critique, especially not on live television. Jimmy, too, looked momentarily stunned, his usual confidence wavering as he realized he might have pushed things too far. For a split second, the only sound in the studio was the faint hum of the lights overhead. Then Jimmy attempted to recover, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Whoa, okay, looks like we hit a nerve, he said, trying to pivot back to safer ground. Let's dial it down a bit, huh? But Keanu wasn't having it. He leaned forward, planting his hands firmly on his knees as he fixed Jimmy with an unwavering stare. This isn't about hitting a nerve, he said, his voice rising slightly, not in anger, but in passion. It's about having respect for the topics we're discussing. These aren't jokes, Jimmy, they're real problems that affect real people. And if you're not willing to treat them with the seriousness they deserve, then maybe you shouldn't bring them up in the first place. The audience erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs, unsure whether to cheer for Keanu's boldness or remain silent in the face of escalating conflict. Jimmy, clearly rattled, tried to regain control of the situation. All right, let's move on, he said quickly, gesturing toward the band as if signaling for a commercial break. But Keanu wasn't done yet. I came here tonight to talk about my movie, Keanu continued, his voice firm but controlled, but also because I thought this platform could be used to have meaningful conversations. If you're not interested in doing that, then I don't see the point in staying. With those words, Keanu stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he rose to his full height. The movement was deliberate, almost cinematic, as if the cameras had zoomed in to capture every detail of the moment. For a heartbeat, the entire studio seemed suspended in time. Jimmy frozen mid-gesture, the audience staring in stunned silence, and Keanu standing tall, his jacket slung over his shoulder. Jimmy stammered, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. Wait, hold on, Keanu, come on, man, let's not do this, he pleaded, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine concern. But Keanu didn't hesitate. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Jimmy alone on stage, with nothing but the echo of his footsteps filling the void. As Keanu disappeared backstage, the audience erupted into a cacophony of reactions, some clapping enthusiastically, others whispering frantically to their neighbors. Jimmy sat motionless, for a moment his face a mixture of disbelief and embarrassment. The crew scrambled to fill the sudden silence, with the band launching into an impromptu tune that felt jarringly out of place, given the gravity of what had just transpired. Backstage, Keanu moved swiftly, brushing past startled staff members who hadn't anticipated such a dramatic exit. His publicist trailed after him, attempting to offer reassurance or advice, but Keanu waved her off with a dismissive gesture. He knew exactly what he was doing, and why. This wasn't about ego or pride. It was about standing up for what he believed in, even if it meant walking away from one of the most high-profile platforms in entertainment. In the studio, Jimmy finally found his voice, addressing the audience with a nervous laugh. Well, that was certainly unexpected, he said, his attempt at humor falling flat. We'll be right back after this break. As the show cut to commercial, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. not just for Jimmy and his team, but for everyone watching at home. Social media feeds lit up instantly, with clips of the confrontation spreading like wildfire. What had started as a routine late-night interview had spiraled into something far greater, a clash of ideals that exposed the delicate balance between entertainment and authenticity. And as the dust began to settle, one thing was clear. This moment would go down in history, not just as a memorable episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live, but as a defining chapter in Keanu Reeves' legacy, one where he chose principle over popularity and conviction over comfort. As Keanu Reeves walked off the stage, the studio erupted into chaos. The audience, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, was divided in their reactions. Some clapped fervently, clearly siding with Keanu and applauding his boldness. Others sat stunned, unsure how to process what had just unfolded. A few even booed, though it was hard to tell if they were upset with Keanu for leaving or with Jimmy for pushing him too far. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel remained seated at his desk, visibly flustered as he tried to regain control of the situation. Folks, let's take a quick break," Jimmy stammered, gesturing awkwardly toward the band. His usual charm seemed to have deserted him, replaced by an air of discomfort that was uncharacteristic for the seasoned host. The band launched into a lively tune, but the music felt forced, unable to mask the palpable tension hanging over the room. Backstage, things were no less chaotic. Producers scrambled to figure out how to handle the rest of the show, while security guards hovered near the exits, unsure if further intervention would be necessary. Keanu, meanwhile, moved with purpose through the labyrinth of hallways behind the scenes. His publicist trailed after him, her heels clicking rapidly against the tiled floor as she attempted to convince him to reconsider. "Keanu, please just wait a second," she pleaded, her voice tinged with panic. "This is live TV. We can fix this. You don't have to leave." But Keanu didn't slow down. He shook his head firmly, his jaw set in determination. "I'm not staying," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If this is how they want to treat serious topics, then I don't belong here." His words echoed down the corridor, drawing curious glances from crew members who had paused mid-task to witness the drama unfolding before them. One intern gawked openly, clutching a clipboard to her chest like a shield, while another whispered urgently into a headset, likely updating someone higher up about the situation. Despite the commotion around him, Keanu remained unfazed, his focus unwavering as he made his way toward the exit. Back on stage, Jimmy was doing his best to salvage the segment. When the cameras returned from commercial break, he addressed the audience directly, attempting to explain what had happened. "Folks, obviously that didn't go quite as planned," he admitted, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Sometimes these things happen when you're having honest conversations, but hey, that's live TV, right?" The audience responded with a mix of polite applause and uneasy murmurs. While some appreciated Jimmy's attempt to lighten the mood, others weren't convinced. Social media had already exploded with reactions, and clips of the heated exchange were spreading like wildfire. Viewers at home debated furiously whether Keanu had been justified in walking out, or if Jimmy had simply been doing his job as a talk show host. Memes, hashtags, and hot takes flooded platforms like Twitter and Instagram, turning the incident into a trending topic within minutes. Jimmy continued gamely, introducing the next guest, a comedian scheduled to perform a stand-up routine. But the energy in the room had shifted irreparably. Even the comedian struggled to land jokes, sensing that the audience's minds were elsewhere. Every laugh line fell a little flatter than usual, and the applause felt muted compared to earlier segments. It was clear that the shadow of Keanu's departure loomed large over the remainder of the show. Behind the scenes, producers huddled in a makeshift meeting, trying to decide how to address the fallout. Should they issue a statement? Apologize to Keanu publicly? Or let the controversy play out organically, hoping that time would dull its impact? Opinions were split, with some arguing that Jimmy should double down on his stance and defend his line of questioning, while others urged caution, fearing that alienating Keanu could damage the show's reputation. Ultimately, they decided to release a vague neutral statement acknowledging the unexpected moment without taking sides. For Keanu, the aftermath played out differently. As he stepped outside the studio into the cool night air, he took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to collect his thoughts. Paparazzi swarmed him immediately, shouting questions about what had happened inside. Reporters holding microphones jostled for position, their flashes illuminating the darkened street. But Keanu ignored them, climbing into a waiting car without uttering a single word. His silence spoke volumes, reinforcing the impression that he stood firmly by his decision. Word of the incident spread quickly beyond social media, making headlines across major news outlets. Late-night talk shows and morning programs alike dissected the confrontation, with commentators weighing in on both sides. Some praised Keanu for standing up for his principles, calling him a refreshing voice in an industry often criticized for superficiality. Others accused him of being overly sensitive, suggesting that Jimmy's questions were par for the course in celebrity interviews. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was undeniable. The clash between Keanu and Jimmy had captured the world's attention. In the days that followed, the ripple effects became impossible to ignore. Ticket sales for Keanu's new movie skyrocketed, fueled by fans eager to support him after his principled stand. Merchandise bearing his name sold out online, and fan art celebrating his integrity flooded social media. For many, Keanu's actions reinforced why they admired him, not just for his talent as an actor, but for his authenticity as a person. On the flip side, Jimmy faced significant backlash. Critics accused him of crossing a line, turning what should have been a respectful discussion into a spectacle designed to provoke controversy. Fans of the show expressed disappointment, with some even threatening to boycott future episodes. Ratings dipped slightly in the immediate aftermath, though loyal viewers argued that Jimmy was simply doing his job and shouldn't be vilified for asking tough questions. Amidst all the noise, both men retreated from the spotlight temporarily. Keanu focused on promoting his film through more controlled settings, opting for print interviews and pre-recorded appearances rather than risking another live confrontation. Jimmy, meanwhile, adopted a more cautious approach during subsequent episodes, steering clear of controversial topics and sticking to safer ground. Yet despite their efforts to move past the incident, neither man could escape the shadow it cast over their careers, or the lingering questions about accountability, responsibility, and the role of entertainment in addressing real-world issues. As the dust began to settle, one question lingered in the minds of audiences everywhere. Was this a fleeting moment of drama, destined to fade into obscurity, or a turning point that would redefine how celebrities and talk show hosts navigate difficult conversations? Only time would tell. But for now, the story of Keanu Reeves walking off Jimmy Kimmel Live remained etched in the collective consciousness, a testament to the power of conviction and the unpredictable nature of live television. In the days following the explosive incident on Jimmy Kimmel Live, the fallout dominated headlines, talk shows, and social media feeds around the world. The confrontation between Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel had transcended the boundaries of a typical celebrity interview gone wrong. It had become a cultural moment that sparked debates about everything from free speech to the responsibilities of public figures. Both men found themselves at the center of an unprecedented media storm, with opinions sharply divided over who was right and who was wrong. Keanu broke his silence first, not through a carefully crafted press release or a late-night tweet, but during an in-depth interview with a respected journalist known for asking thoughtful, probing questions. Sitting in a quiet studio, dressed casually in his signature understated style, Keanu appeared reflective as he addressed the events of that fateful evening. His tone was calm but resolute, and his words carried the weight of someone who had spent considerable time processing what had happened. "I don't regret standing up for my beliefs," Keanu began, his voice steady and measured. "But I do regret walking off the show. That wasn't the best way to handle things, and I understand it created confusion and disappointment for some people. However, I stand by what I said, that important issues deserve respect, no matter where they're being discussed." When asked about Jimmy's line of questioning, Keanu paused for a moment before responding. I know Jimmy has a job to do, and part of that involves pushing boundaries. But there's a difference between challenging someone to think deeper and turning serious topics into entertainment. If we're going to talk about real-world problems, then let's have those conversations with sincerity and purpose. The Rao interview drew widespread praise, with many applauding Keanu for addressing the controversy head-on, while maintaining his trademark humility. Fans flooded social media with messages of support, calling him a role model for speaking truth to power. Critics, however, argued that walking off a live show was unprofessional, regardless of the circumstances. Some even suggested that Keanu's actions undermined his argument, implying that walking away only reinforced the perception of hypocrisy he had accused Jimmy of perpetuating. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel also took to the airwaves to address the situation, but, unlike Keanu, he chose to do so on his own turf. During a subsequent episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live, he opened the show with a monologue dedicated entirely to the incident. For once, his usual playful demeanor was replaced by a more somber tone, signaling that this was no ordinary segment. "Look, folks, I want to start by saying I messed up," Jimmy admitted, looking directly into the camera. "I pushed too hard and I crossed a line. Keanu is one of the most genuine, down-to-earth people in this business, and I should have treated him, and the topics we discussed, with more care." He went on to explain that his intention hadn't been to provoke or embarrass Keanu, but rather to spark a meaningful conversation. "Sometimes, as hosts, we walk a fine line between asking tough questions and coming across as disrespectful. In this case, I leaned too far in the wrong direction, and for that, I'm sorry." Jimmy's apology struck a chord with viewers, many of whom appreciated his willingness to take responsibility for his actions. Yet, as with Keanu's response, reactions were mixed. While some praised Jimmy for owning up to his mistakes, others dismissed his apology as insincere, accusing him of prioritizing damage control over genuine remorse. Social media lit up again, with hashtags like Takur Team Keanu and Takur Team Jimmy trending simultaneously as fans debated whose side to take. Despite their separate apologies, neither man reached out to the other publicly. There were no joint statements, no handshake reunions on camera, just a mutual acknowledgement that the incident had exposed fault lines in how difficult conversations are handled in the public eye. For Keanu, the experience seemed to reinforce his belief in using his platform responsibly, while for Jimmy, it served as a reminder of the delicate balance required when navigating sensitive topics. As the weeks passed, the initial fervor surrounding the incident began to wane, though its impact continued to resonate. Late-night comedians joked about the showdown, often exaggerating details for comedic effect. One sketch featured two actors parodying Keanu and Jimmy, with Keanu portrayed as a stoic superhero defending justice and Jimmy as a mischievous prankster trying to stir the pot. Audiences roared with laughter, proving that even moments of tension could eventually find their place in pop culture lore. Interestingly, the controversy also sparked broader discussions about the role of celebrities and media personalities in shaping public discourse. Opinion pieces in major newspapers explored whether entertainers have a moral obligation to address societal issues, or if their primary responsibility lies in providing escapism. Others questioned whether late-night talk shows, traditionally seen as light-hearted entertainment, were equipped to tackle complex subjects without trivializing them. For Keanu, the aftermath brought both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, his principled stance earned him renewed admiration from fans and peers alike. Fellow actors and industry insiders praised him for refusing to compromise his values, with some even suggesting that his actions might inspire others to speak out more boldly. On the other hand, the incident also reignited scrutiny of his career choices, with critics pointing out the apparent contradiction of decrying performative activism while starring in blockbuster films funded by corporate giants. Yet Keanu seemed unfazed by the criticism. He continued promoting his movie with grace and professionalism, steering clear of further controversy while staying true to his convictions. When asked in another interview how he planned to move forward, he smiled softly and said, "You learn from every experience, good or bad. This was a reminder for me to keep focusing on what matters, using my voice to make a positive difference wherever I can." As for Jimmy, the incident prompted a subtle shift in his hosting style. While he remained as witty and irreverent as ever, he adopted a more cautious approach when broaching sensitive topics. Guests noticed that his questions became less combative and more conversational, allowing for deeper, more nuanced discussions. Behind the scenes, producers reportedly implemented new guidelines to ensure future interviews avoided unnecessary conflict, recognizing that not every controversial moment translates into positive publicity. By the time the dust fully settled, the clash between Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel had cemented its place in late-night television history, not just as a dramatic spectacle, but as a catalyst for reflection on the intersection of entertainment, authenticity, and accountability. It reminded audiences that behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, real human emotions and principles are at play, and while neither man emerged entirely unscathed, both demonstrated resilience and growth in the face of adversity. Though reconciliation between Keanu and Jimmy remained elusive, at least publicly, their shared experience underscored a universal truth. Even in moments of disagreement, there is value in listening, learning, and striving to do better. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale or a testament to integrity, the story of their heated exchange would linger in the minds of viewers long after the camera stopped rolling. In the months that followed the explosive confrontation on Jimmy Kimmel Live, life for both Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel began to settle into a new rhythm. The initial whirlwind of media frenzy, public debate, and social media chaos had subsided, leaving behind a quieter but no less significant aftermath. For those who had watched the drama unfold, it felt like the closing chapter of a story that had captivated millions. A moment where two very different personalities clashed under the bright lights of live television. But as time passed, it became clear that the ripple effects of their encounter would continue to shape not only their personal trajectories, but also broader conversations about celebrity culture, accountability, and the role of entertainment in addressing real-world issues. For Keanu, the incident reinforced his status as a cultural icon, an actor whose appeal transcended his roles on screen and spoke to something deeper within the human spirit. Fans admired him not just for his humility or kindness, but for his willingness to stand firm in his beliefs, even when doing so came at a cost. His decision to walk off the show was seen by many as a bold move, one that underscored his commitment to authenticity over popularity. While some critics argued that walking away might have been impulsive, others viewed it as a powerful statement. Sometimes, standing up for your principles means knowing when to step back from situations that compromise your values. As he continued, promoting his latest film, Keanu adopted a reflective approach, using interviews and public appearances to emphasize the importance of sincerity and intentionality. During a sit-down with a prominent talk show host known for her empathetic interviewing style, Keanu opened up about how the experience had impacted him personally. "It made me think a lot about what I want my legacy to be," he said thoughtfully, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "I've always tried to use my platform responsibly, but this reminded me that every choice matters. How you speak, how you act, and even how you respond when things get tough." The audience listened intently, hanging on his every word. There was a palpable sense of respect in the room, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something rare, a celebrity unafraid to grapple with difficult truths. When asked whether he harbored any lingering resentment toward Jimmy, Keanu shook his head gently. "No hard feelings," he said with a small smile. "We're all human, and we make mistakes. What's important is learning from them and moving forward." On Jimmy's side, the fallout prompted a period of introspection that extended beyond his hosting duties. Though he had publicly apologized for pushing too hard during the infamous interview, the incident lingered in his mind, serving as a reminder of the delicate balance required when navigating sensitive topics. Late-night talk shows exist in a unique space. They are meant to entertain, inform, and occasionally challenge, but finding the right mix can be tricky. For Jimmy, the clash with Keanu became a turning point, prompting him to reevaluate how he approached controversial subjects and the guests brave enough to discuss them. In subsequent episodes of Jimmy Kimmel Live, Viewers noticed subtle changes in his demeanor and style. He still delivered his signature humor, poking fun at politicians, celebrities, and everyday absurdities. But there was a newfound sensitivity in how he handled serious discussions. One particularly memorable segment featured an environmental activist discussing climate change solutions. Instead of peppering her with lighthearted quips or attempting to inject levity into the conversation, Jimmy listened attentively, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that allowed her message to shine. Afterward, she thanked him publicly, praising his ability to create a platform for meaningful dialogue without overshadowing the issue itself. Behind the scenes, Jimmy worked closely with his production team to implement new guidelines aimed at fostering more respectful and constructive conversations. These included pre-interview briefings designed to clarify boundaries and ensure mutual understanding between hosts and guests. While some skeptics dismissed these efforts as mere PR damage, others saw them as evidence of genuine growth. Even longtime fans of the show noted that Jimmy seemed more grounded, as if the encounter with Keanu had forced him to confront aspects of his hosting persona that needed refinement. Despite their separate paths, the possibility of reconciliation between Keanu and Jimmy remained a topic of speculation among fans and media outlets alike. Rumors swirled periodically about potential reunions, perhaps a surprise appearance by Keanu on Jimmy Kimmel Live, or a joint charity event where the two could bury the hatchet publicly. Neither man confirmed nor denied these rumors, choosing instead to focus on their respective careers and personal lives. Yet in interviews, both hinted at a shared hope for eventual closure. During a Q&A session at a film festival, Keanu was asked directly whether he'd consider appearing on Jimmy's show again. He paused for a moment, considering the question, carefully before responding. "Never say never," he said with a wry grin. "If the timing feels right and the purpose aligns with what I believe in, then sure, why not? Life's too short to hold grudges." Similarly, Jimmy addressed the possibility during a podcast appearance, expressing admiration for Keanu's integrity and resilience. "Keanu is someone I deeply respect," he admitted candidly. "If he ever wants to come back on the show, the door is wide open, and hey, maybe next time we'll keep it light. Talk about motorcycles or something." While neither man explicitly reached out to the other, their mutual acknowledgement of the incident's complexity suggested that forgiveness, if not outright friendship, might eventually emerge. For now, though, they remained connected primarily through the collective memory of audiences worldwide, a testament to the enduring power of moments that challenge us to reflect on who we are and what we value. Beyond the personal dynamics between Keanu and Jimmy, the incident sparked lasting changes in the entertainment industry. Late-night talk shows, once seen primarily as vehicles for comedic relief, began incorporating more substantive segments dedicated to exploring pressing global issues. Hosts across networks started inviting activists, scientists, and community leaders alongside traditional celebrity guests, creating opportunities for diverse voices to reach wider audiences. Critics credited Keanu's principled stand and Jimmy's subsequent evolution as catalysts for this shift, proving that even uncomfortable confrontations can lead to positive outcomes. For fans of both men, the story served as a reminder of the humanity behind the headlines. Beneath the glitz and glamour of Hollywood lies a world populated by individuals navigating the same challenges and contradictions as everyone else. Keanu's steadfastness and Jimmy's willingness to adapt demonstrated that growth often arises from discomfort, that true progress requires courage, humility, and a willingness to embrace imperfection. As the months turned into years, the memory of that fateful night on Jimmy Kimmel Live faded slightly, replaced by newer scandals, controversies, and triumphs. But for those who remembered, it remained a defining moment, a snapshot of two men grappling with their roles in an ever-changing cultural landscape. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a lesson in accountability, or simply a fascinating piece of entertainment history, the clash between Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness. And perhaps that was its greatest legacy, a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, meaningful conversations can take root, and that sometimes the most profound lessons emerge from the messiest moments.